You're listening to CAAT Tales, the podcast of SLC Faculty Local 417, your union connection. Each episode, we bring you real stories from our members, practical tips on your rights, and the kind of information that helps us all move forward.
Welcome to CAAT Tales. I'm your host, Julie White, and today we're celebrating International Women's Month by honoring women who shape our lives, our work, and our communities. We've got a beautiful episode lined up for you. Guest host Ekta Singh joins us for another edition of Belonging at the Table. Today she sits down with Professors Shu Han and Allison Taylor to discuss family traditions, from the big production of homemade wontons to the invisible comfort of a grandmother's hug. Our guests share how lessons of organization and social servant leadership influence their teaching at St. Lawrence College. And then, in Is It a Gripe or a Grievance, Gillian continues to help us navigate our rights. We'll also hear a technical breakdown of Article 13 and how faculty can assert their academic freedom. And stay tuned for a special member spotlight, where I'm joined by part-time faculty member Maria Helena Delgado, who shares her vibrant journey from Bogotá to Kingston, reflecting on her work as an interpreter and the bravery that can be found in a person's accent. Let's get started.
Grab a cup of coffee and pull up a chair. It's time for Belonging at the Table with host Ekta Singh.
Welcome, everyone, to Belonging at the Table. I am your host, Ekta Singh, and I'm so glad you're joining us for this special International Women's Month edition of our Belonging at the Table segment. Every March, we celebrate International Women's Day, but beyond a single date, this month invites us to pause and reflect on the countless ways women have shaped our lives, our work, and our communities. It's time to honor not only the extraordinary milestones, but also the small everyday acts of care, courage, and creativity that women bring to every space they inhabit. In this episode today, we are gathering around a virtual kitchen table with two incredible colleagues and professors at St. Lawrence College, Allison Taylor and Shu Han. They're here to share stories about women whose love and wisdom continue to nourish us. We'll talk about family tradition, food memories, and ways that those lessons show up in how we touch, lead, and build belonging at St. Lawrence College. So wherever you are listening from, welcome to the table. Feel free to pour yourself a cup of tea, take a breath, and join us as we celebrate the women who remind us that care is powerful, courage is contagious, and belonging begins with connection. So welcome, Allison and Shu. Thank you for joining us today. How are you both doing?
I'm feeling great.
Doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm wondering if you could both please begin by introducing yourself, your roles at St. Lawrence College, and a bit about your professional and personal background. And why don't we begin with Shu, please?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Shu Han. This is how you pronounce my name. Shu fly, don't bother me. Shu fly, don't bother me. Just sing that song. So Shu is a Mandarin name. I was born and raised in Beijing, China, and I came to Canada when I was 22 years old. Did my master's degree at the University of Guelph. That's what brought me to Canada. And then after that, I studied my PhD at Queen's University, and then I settled down in Kingston. So I was an international student, just like many international students that we are teaching. I started teaching at St. Lawrence College about 7 or 8 years ago, started in the business analytics program, teaching business analytics, specialized in math and business intelligence courses. And recently, I've been teaching in the business diploma program. So my role is a full-time faculty and a program coordinator in the business diploma program currently. Yeah. So that's my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Shu. We're so happy to have you at the college. Now on to Allison.
Hi, thanks, Ekta. So I am full-time faculty at the Cornwall campus. I've been with St. Lawrence College since January of 2015, so 11 years now, I guess. And the bulk of my career, since I started, I've been with the Career College Prep program at St. Lawrence. That's the academic upgrading program. I teach communications in that program, and I'm also the tri-campus coordinator. And I also teach in our CICE program, Community Integration through Cooperative Education. And so 2 of our pathway programs
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've had the great privilege of working alongside both of you and very, very interested to have our conversation today, especially in recognition of International Women's Day and International Women's Month, and sharing and reflecting on women who have shaped us, who have inspired us, who have raised us to be the women that we are today. And to start off our conversation, I wondered if you could both share with us about a woman who has raised you or shaped you. And is there a particular dish or scent or kitchen memory that instantly brings them to mind? And why don't we start with Allison?
I struggled with this question a little bit because I have a range of memories. I remember my family and my mom in particular. We are all kind of very foodie sort of people. We love food. We love cooking. I mean, they did more than I probably do now. And so I remember family meals, especially at holidays, very traditional sort of European meals with turkeys and all the fixings and that kind of thing. But interestingly, my mother was a huge fan and accomplished cook of Chinese food. So we grew up with a lot of Chinese food in the house as well. And I remember big production parties for wontons and egg rolls and that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
I also remember my mother, though, as a working mom in the late 60s, early 70s. She worked full time. And so day to day, I also remembered like just the challenges of, which I can relate to now, of kind of just getting the food on the table every night too. So
Right.
a real mix of food-related memories, at least in terms of my family of origin.
That's so interesting, Allison, about the love and passion for Chinese cooking. Where do you think that came from?
I have no idea. I've been trying to think about it. I think probably she just loved the flavors. I mean, it was certainly not as accessible back then. And, we certainly didn't eat out as much back then. But I think she was attracted to the culture and the flavors, and she had an amazing collection of Chinese cookbooks. And so, even though we didn't get a lot of exposure to the culture, I certainly grew up with a lot of the flavors. And interestingly, as you may know, Ekta, my oldest daughter, was born in China. So it feels like it kind of closes that circle a little bit.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So interesting. Thank you for sharing. Let's move to Shu. Shu, tell us about a particular woman in your life that shaped you and raised you, and perhaps a food story that connects to your sense of identity or where you call home.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Allison for liking Chinese culture and Chinese food. I want to share with you a story that's not really food related, but is about my culture, about my grandmother. So what comes to my mind when I'm thinking about home is my grandmother's big hugs in the middle of the night. Okay, so my grandmother passed away in November last year at the age of 92. So she was my last living grandparent. My
Wow.
memories of her often come back to me, which remind me how much love she gave me and how much I love her. To keep her stories alive, I want to share about her big hugs, not her meals, but her hugs. So when I left China for Canada, I was only 22 years old. And so after I left home, I didn't go back to visit my grandparents very often. I did it just a few times. I still remember the first time I left Beijing for Canada. I visited my grandmother a few days before my flight and stayed overnight with her. She had a large bed, so I slept beside her in the same bed. I didn't do that for a long time, but I was trying to behave like a child. In the middle of the night, she woke me up and hugged me. She squeezed me so much, and I was awake. But she didn't realize that I was fully awake. She mumbled that I'd better to hug her now, or I may not have a chance to hug her anymore. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
So that was deep in my memory. So now my grandmother has passed away. So I keep her hugs as my memorabilia, an invisible one.
Special and beautiful memory to share with us, Shu. Thank you so much. I could feel the essence of the hug in your storytelling. So thank you. I'm glad that's something that you still feel deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you.
So both of you have shared about, a parent and a grandparent that has had a significant impact on, the way that you think about connection to home and, connection to food and identity. Many of us have also learned things like care our patience, and our resilience in quiet ways from these women that have come before us. I'm wondering if you could now share a bit about a piece of wisdom or a habit or a learning that you have carried forward in your own life and classroom from one of these women, either one of the women that you've shared about or maybe a different impactful woman from your life. Why don't we begin with Shu?
I'm thinking about a piece of wisdom that I carry forward to my classroom from a woman that influenced me is also my grandmother. And that piece of wisdom is being organized. My grandma was a clean and organized person. I grew up seeing her cleaning the house, folding clothes, and putting things away. I think I like my things to be organized because of her influence. I've been teaching business analytics. In the first lecture of a semester, I always teach my students to organize their computers, label their files, keep their notes of their data, and delete the file that they don't need anymore. So being organized and paying attention to details are the basic qualifications of being a business analyst. You need to make sure your data are correct before you can do any analysis. So I think being organized is not just a good habit for housework, but also for influential work such as business analytics, which can shape organizations' decision making. And we can all learn about these qualifications from the women around us.
Great. That's a great habit and piece of wisdom. Thank you, Shu, for sharing that. Let's now go to Allison.
Yeah, I think what stays with me most from a woman who was my manager a few years ago, and she has since passed, but I remember having a conversation once with her about leadership and what that was. I think at the time I was taking a leadership development course or something like that, and I was feeling a little bit torn with what is the role of leadership, because part of me sort of thought by signing up for this, was I wanting to be like in charge of things or bossy, like I was sort of struggling with that. I was interested in the skills very much, but I really wasn't sure why. And I remember this woman telling me that she approached her role as a leader as ensuring that the teams she worked with were well resourced, that they had what they needed to do their jobs. And that stuck with me because it helped me sort of resolve this inner conflict I was having around my interest in leadership. And I think it also spills into the work I do in the classroom and with our upgrading students, many of whom come with maybe a checkered kind of academic past or experience and maybe haven't had the best experiences in classrooms. Some obviously have, but I've come to learn that, for those of us that have had the benefit of great education and few limitations placed on us and that sort of thing, that is very much a privilege, and that for many folks, they just simply don't have or don't perceive that they have these opportunities. And what can be a barrier for them sometimes to us from my privileged side anyway, is really a small thing that I can help solve. So I see my role very much as helping those students with problem solving so that they don't get bogged down. So in the same way, it kind of feels a little bit like what this colleague of mine told me once, like to try to make sure that our students have a clear path to try and accomplish their goals.
Absolutely. And I think that example of ensuring the spaces that we occupy are well resourced, are well supported, I think that can carry into all aspects of our work and teaching and at home. So I think that's a really powerful piece of wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. We're now going to move along into our feelings and concepts around belonging. And I'm wondering if you could both share an example or a story of the way in which a woman in your life has cultivated belonging and making you feel a sense of connection and feeling seen, either, at home or in a professional setting. And then how might that example influence the way you create or nurture spaces where other people belong? Why don't we begin with Shu?
When I was preparing for this question, I feel like, maybe I'll share a story about Ekta. To cultivate belonging, Ekta has been a very active member in the SLC community, and then it's grateful to work with her and to admire her leadership and her teaching style. I feel with a colleague like Ekta around me, I feel I belong here. I feel my qualification being valued, my opinion being heard, and my feelings being recognized and filled as well. So I really appreciate Ekta being my colleague and give me this opportunity to share my thought on this podcast.
Wow, thank you so much, Shu. I feel the exact same way about you. And I think, Shu, you've been here for many years and have seen so many shifts and changes in the colleagues and also shifts and changes in our student demographic. And what do you do to create belonging in your class?
How about I share one technique that I use?
Yeah.
And it works really well. I play music in my classroom. Yeah, at the beginning of the semester, I always let my students to do a student information survey. I let them just fill out a Microsoft form. And I ask about their background and the content, whether they are familiar with the content that we're about to teach in the class. And I also ask them to share a piece of music that they like, and they can provide me with a YouTube link or a website or just the name of the music. And I play those musics in class. And often students share their favorite song in their own culture.
Yes.
So when I play their songs in their culture, they feel their culture being appreciated and valued in the classroom.
That's beautiful. I love that. Music is such a powerful connector and it gets us instantly feeling energized and excited. I love that idea. I try to do that as well, but I don't do it every class, and it's something I would like to do. So you've inspired me now to get more interest around music and even dancing. I think either beginning or end of class. I think it's a great way to just let loose with some pent up energy. All right, Allison. So we're talking about examples of women who have cultivated spaces of belonging for us, for you, at home, in a professional setting, and then how that may influence how you've created and nurtured spaces of belonging in your work at SLC.
So my mind goes to many, but I think probably the most recently impactful has been our Indigenous curriculum specialist, Shannon Hall at SLC. We worked together on a project. I participated in her Indigenous curriculum program, and we worked on the project for Wiping the Tears, which was an acknowledgement ceremony, a ceremony of condolence offered to the SLC community by members of our Indigenous neighbors communities. And I found that super powerful in many, many ways. The generosity of her spirit in helping me and the other people that we worked with to understand the importance of relationships in Indigenous culture. And honestly, I struggled. Why, with the history that we have with our Indigenous neighbors, would a community want to offer us as settler communities condolence for the struggles in our relationships? And that really helped me grow and think about different ways of viewing the world. I think to that point, I hadn't really understood the notion of Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and the power of worldviews and how different they can be and how they have such ripple out effects in terms of how we do everything. And so, I've just tried to incorporate both broader thinking, but also that sort of generosity of spirit to being open to whatever the classroom has to offer on a given day and wherever the students are at.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a really beautiful example. And I think I too have been greatly influenced by the work of Shannon and, the other members of the Indigenous student team, and attending examples of learning like the Kairos blanket exercise as well, and continuous learning in this area. How might that relationship and that learning with Shannon, how has that influenced your own approaches to your teaching and learning?
That's a work in progress, I'll be honest. I feel strongly I do land acknowledgements at the beginning of each class, and I try to encourage students to sort of reflect on our relationships with nature and land and communities. I still feel like there's a whole lot more that I could be doing on that front, but I think, it's a journey for all of us. Hoping to do more. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think just, your example of sharing beginning class with a land acknowledgement, that's very powerful. And I think that is inspiring for our listeners when our listeners are thinking, what are some tangible examples of things that we can do? I think that's a really powerful example of how, in our role as a professor at St. Lawrence College, that we can start to cultivate that journey towards truth and reconciliation. So thank you for sharing that. So as we come to the end of our podcast segment on belonging at the table, I'd like to find out more about each of you and your own multiple identities that you each hold, cultural, gendered, professional. How do you honor those intersecting layers of yourself in your work? And what has that journey taught you about your own authenticity and care and kind of bringing aspects of yourself to the classroom, to your work? How do you honor who you are, and how does that come out in your work as a professor? Why don't we begin with Allison?
That's such an interesting question. I love it on many, many levels. I think one thing we've all learned since the pandemic, and those experiences of teaching from home in our kitchens where things happen around us, is that we've I think become a little more comfortable showing our vulnerability and our humanity in the classroom, and we extend a little more grace when stuff doesn't always go as planned. So I love that. I'm very passionate about issues related to belonging and inclusion because of my own values, but also because of my daughters, one who was born in China and one who was born in Ethiopia. And I think of their futures as women of color in this world. And so, a lot of the effort that I sort of put into promoting issues related to acceptance and belonging is kind of thinking of their futures. And I find that stuff feeds me day to day, learning about these things, the whole lifelong learning thing, expanding my horizons, talking to people of all kinds of backgrounds. That's sort of what keeps me going. I mean, I love my teaching, obviously, but that growth and learning from each other, I find really powerful. Certainly in both the upgrading classrooms and the CICE classrooms, I think relationships are maybe even more important in those rooms than in typical post-secondary environments. And so I see the power of those relationships, both with myself as a teacher, but with learning specialists and other support people on campus. And I see the difference that can make in our students' success.
Yes.
Yeah, I really feel like it's important that we do whatever we can to sort of meet our students where they are. And sometimes the classroom environment doesn't always give us the opportunity to do that one-on-one, but certainly where we have that opportunity, I get a lot back from that, because that feels like my work is more authentic and then I'm making more of a difference. So I value that a lot.
I think people feel that, Allison, when you talked about your focus on relationships. I know folks from Cornwall and those of us that have had the opportunity to work with you, I think that shines very deeply. And I love that message as well, that, yes, we're professors, but I think it's a great reminder that versus, content, right? We are humans first. I think leading with that focus on relationships is such a great reminder, especially in this International Women's Month. So thank you. All right, let's go to Shu.
Thank you for the reminder that we are human being first. And we are professors, we are teaching knowledge, we are teaching skills, but the first thing we teach in the classroom is human relationship. I really like that reminder. For me, I want to share how my approach of teaching to influence belonging in my classroom. I feel like my identity as a woman, as a minority, as an international student before is something. When I study in the classroom and teach my students, I feel myself is an example. So when students see me, they see a path. And so I feel like myself is also encouraging those international students who are exploring a new culture, new language, a new country, and want to establish their lives in Canada, to see a path, a career path, and a life path in front of them by seeing me.
Yes.
Right. So for me, when I trying to help those students build a relationship in the classroom, I'm helping them to understand each other's background and each other's path before they come to SLC, and value their culture and help each other to build a path in front of them. I feel my role as a teacher is a social servant. So I prepare my students for their careers, and at the same time, I'm also preparing good citizens for our society, good humans for our country.
That's Very beautiful. I love that term, being a social servant as a professor. I think that's, again, really powerful reminder about the human relations coming first. And I think you touched upon it as well, Shu, the power of mentorship. And when students, other international students, that can come from identities and backgrounds that are similar to you and that see you in such an amazing position, accomplished a PhD, accomplished as program coordinator. I think that mentorship also is something really powerful.
Thank you.
Our last question now is coming back to the faculty union that we're all a part of. This podcast is an extension of the work that this amazing faculty executive has been doing, especially during these last couple of years when there's been so much instability and many challenges. And I think we want to elevate the voices of our membership and hearing from, the different backgrounds and perspectives of our membership. What do you think our faculty union could be doing better to support the unique needs of diverse women that make up the SLC community? And let's start with Allison.
Such an interesting question. I think what I get most out of the union team is just opportunities for connection, even if it's just a little town hall meeting or an update or sometimes social events in person. Gives us all an opportunity to share a little bit of what we're worried about, especially in light of all those changes that you mentioned, Ekta, and different approaches for managing things. Flexibility, in terms of our roles, flexibility, I think, is something that maybe we could advocate a little bit more for. I'm just thinking about younger women with children and older women such as myself who have gone through caregiving for older parents, for example, or grandparents.
Right.
These are our realities, and building on what we were talking about before about humans first, these can be sometimes challenging times in our lives. And so the opportunity just to recognize those realities at maybe beginning, middle, and end of career. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to hold each other up in those moments. Yeah.
Great. Yes. Great recommendations. Thank you. Now to Shu.
Yeah, I totally agree with Allison. We need some spaces or event to meet each other, chat with each other, recognize each other, and understand each other so that we can hold each other up. Yeah, I'm hoping the union can create these type of spaces for us.
I think these are great recommendations, and I think things that we are talking about, and things that we can definitely put forth and recommend moving forward. I think with the warmer weather coming our way, it would be so nice to have even a spring social connection with our faculty membership. So that's something we can definitely look into.
I love that idea.
Well, that brings us to the end of our Belonging at the Table segment. It was such a pleasure to talk with both of you, Allison and Shu, as we celebrate International Women's Day and International Women's Month. And if you haven't done so, I do encourage you to give yourself some accolades and some grace and recognize that, you both are extraordinary women who are not just professors, but who are mothers, caregivers. You give so much of yourself to the SLC community, to your work. And it's these everyday small moments of care and courage and creativity that, make women like yourselves inspirational here at the college.
And now, another fun episode of Is It a Gripe or a Grievance?
Hi, Gillian. They ask for our learning plans and give us tight deadlines to get them in every semester. Then we hear nothing for what seems like an eternity. But just today, a week before the start of the course, my associate dean returned my learning plan with a lot of critical feedback and a demand that I make mandatory changes to the course structure. Can they do that to me? This is excessive.
Again, sort of, maybe, depends. Yes, technically they can, unless you feel that it's a violation of your academic freedom. So Article 13 is pretty new in our collective agreement, and we don't have a lot of good jurisprudence on it yet. We have some. So if I gave an example like they want you to teach communications, writing skills only via multiple choice and podcasts. Does that hit the learning outcomes? How does that jive with the course outline? If it doesn't jive, then you need to push back, and that would be a violation of Article 13, collective agreement. You could meet with a steward, you could file a grievance. Do you have to do it the way they say you have to do it? Yes. Unfortunately, do now, grieve later. So you have to balance out, why are these changes? Is this just changes for change's sake, or is there something more concretely that you disagree with on a real sort of skill level? You are the professional in the course, you are the knowledge expert. This doesn't jive with what you're teaching. One of the things we're seeing more recently is your learning plan doesn't look like the learning plans from the other two campuses, and so therefore we want them all the same. Is that a violation of the collective agreement? Yes, sort of, maybe. You have to really then sit with the other two faculty and fight it out and say, okay, how are we going to do this? I want to do this and that and the other thing. And oftentimes you can find a way to massage the learning plan to make it more generic so that everybody gets what they want. But that means sitting with your colleagues. Really, really hard to do if you're the only full-timer or the only partial load and you don't know who's teaching the other course. That's where you need to approach the manager and say, great, I want to work with my colleagues. Who are they? And are you going to pay them for the meeting with me and prepping this? Because that's an important thing. They don't have a contract if they're part-time until the first day that they start. And so, yes, they have to start ready, but they don't really have to work until the week before. So it becomes a really dicey situation if you're then going to be dictating to what your part-time partial load colleagues do, because they may not have access to that learning plan. So it's not a simple, clear, can they make you do this? Yes, sort of, to an extent. It's really case by case and how much you're willing to assert your academic freedom in this case. So contact a steward.
And now it's time for another edition of Member Spotlight.
Joining me now is Maria Helena Delgado, a professor of communications and certified interpreter whose journey has taken her from the bustling streets of Bogotá, Colombia, to the heart of Kingston, via Montreal and many points in between. Maria Helena brings a deep passion for bridging communication gaps and helping others find their voice. It's a mission she's carried both into the courtroom and to her classrooms at St. Lawrence. She believes that an accent isn't a barrier, but a badge of bravery and a testament to a life rich with diverse experiences. But before we dive into her inspiring career and her insights on intercultural communication, we're going to break the ice with a bit of fun. Maria Helena, welcome to the show. Are you ready for the rapid fire questions? Here's the first one. What is a simple joy that makes you happy?
My animals, my cats, as I feel that they are coming, loyal, independent, and I like that. It's very inspiring to see that dynamic. And I think that they are dogs dressed as a cat. They have a costume as a cat, but they are dogs. They follow me around. Both my cats are rescues, of course, and both have little issues. That's make it a little bit more, a lot more interesting because we don't buy lives. To me, that's a principle. So I love those two little babies. Yes.
Excellent. What is one song that always lifts your mood?
It's a great question because I have many. I listen to the music 24/7. I have Google in my kitchen, in my bedroom, in my office. I mean, it's all the time music inspires me and keeps me going. The beat is a reminder of how alive we are and the possibilities, but a song, the specific one.
You can go with a genre if you'd like. Is there a certain type of music?
Yes, of course. I like ballads, definitely. But when I'm getting a little tired, I'm going to the kitchen and I invite my husband to dance a little bit. And I put on my tunes because I'm Latin America. So I say, let's do salsa, or let's do bachata, or let's do this. That keeps the blood flowing and the ideas flowing, and that helps a lot. And it's very good for your marriage.
There you go.
Absolutely.
We're getting marital advice here. This is a first for the show.
My husband is Canadian, and he learned to dance with me and with my family. So it's something that he really enjoys.
That's beautiful. Would you prefer adventures with wild horses or adventures with wild dolphins?
If I can have half, that would be great. That would be fabulous. Both bring a different kind of energy. I'm very fortunate to be able in my home country, my homeland, to have country houses. So the smell of the grass, the smell of the flowers, the walking, seeing mountains and seeing horses is familiar and is incredibly inspiring and makes me feel like home. Yes, I'm very respectful of water, though. I don't know, the dolphins, maybe to see them right here from this side is better than being swimming with them, to be honest with you. Yeah, very respectful of water.
Okay. What game show would you like to be on?
Show. You know which one I like? Do you remember that Guess the Tune, something like that they play a couple of pieces of a song and you need to get the song? That I would love to be in that one.
Okay. That again, coming back to that music flowing through your blood.
Yeah, I just love that.
Do you prefer coffee, tea, or do you run purely on chaos?
I like one coffee a day, if possible, or at least every 2 days. I drink tea, and I enjoy. I don't think that it is the tea itself, but what comes along with the tea and the coffee. The communication, the calmness, the decompress is what it means to me. The friendship, the chat, the laughter. That's what I like about tea and coffee. It's more symbolic, right, than the coffee per se or the tea per se.
Do you kill bugs inside or do you release them outside?
I like spiders. Yeah, right? But I remember my grandma used to say, when you see a spider, a surprise. A symbol, a sign that you're going to receive good news or we're going to receive a visitor that you are going to enjoy having. So when I see a spider, I say, hello, how are you? Allow me to place you here before my husband sees you and kill you.
What's one thing that you can't live without?
Physical things, something that you can touch, or water. I drink a lot of water. I love to have not that gigantic thing that I cannot carry with me, but a bottle of water close by, a glass of water. I'm all the time drinking water. Music, definitely. I mean, music is really bring me a lot of life and ideas. I don't know, makes me happy. Makes me really happy.
Beautiful. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Hawaiian.
Love it. I am a huge pineapple on pizza person.
That combination of salt and sweet is very special.
All right, Maria Helena, you're after my heart. Do you prefer routine or spontaneity?
Both. We need both. We need both. I love routines, make me feel grounded and make me feel consistency. And I think that we all need that predictability, consistency. We need that in order to function in a very productive way. I need that. But always there is an opening for spontaneity. I love that.
That adds the beat to your day, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. And I think that was probably the perfect question for us to end our rapid fire question segment on, because certainly your spontaneity is so natural and you have such a wonderful flow to it.
Thank you kindly.
Let's move into kind of getting to know you a little bit better. And you mentioned kind of the grass back home and thinking of the fields back home. So do you want to share with our listeners where back home is and how you made your journey to Canada?
I was born in Colombia, South America. Colombia with an O, not Colombia. Sometimes people ask me, oh, you are from British Columbia. And I say, no. So I was born in Bogotá, in the capital. And I came to Canada as an international student. And I think that was 1994. At that time, I was working as a PR representative for the main commercial airline in Colombia. And that was a job that came to me as a surprise. It was an invitation, and I took the invitation. And it became something extremely important in my life. I think that shaped a lot of who I am today, is experience working for an airline. So I took a sabbatical, and they were very kind to approve everything for me and say, we are going to wait for you for your return. And I came, I attended Concordia, and I fell in love, and I stayed. That wasn't part of the plan. But,
now, when you say you fell in love, it wasn't in love with Canada.
Both. With a wonderful gentleman and with Canada.
Okay.
I was coming back to my job, to my family, to my activities. I was very active. The plan wasn't to stay, even though Canada was in my heart, but wasn't the plan. But love took the decision, right? And I embrace it with a lot of joy. And this is the reason why I ended up in Canada. So the first place was Montreal. I lived in Montreal for 11 years. And then my husband was relocated to Kingston. I loved it. The size of the city, it was very easy. Let's say 2001, 2002, I had a baby at the time. He was 2 years old, and to find a pediatrician, a daycare, and all that was an adventure. But it was easier to navigate in Montreal, of course. Okay. Even though Montreal was in my heart and was my first home in Canada, right? And I'm very happy to go to Montreal every time I can, but Kingston is home. And I'm very grateful for everything that Canada and Kingston have given to me through the years.
Okay. And how many languages do you speak, Maria Helena?
I would say that 2 3/4, because I speak French, but I'm not write French very well. My writing is not perfect, so I wouldn't say that. To me, it's a combination, is to be all together, right? So that's why I say, but I'm totally able to carry a conversation or to deal with my job or my classes, whatever it is, yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your profession, because you were a speech language pathologist.
Yes, that's my background.
So can you talk to me a little bit about that journey? And I know you weren't working as one when you were with the airline, obviously, but what was that transition like coming to Canada?
That's a great question. I love my career. I come from a family of lawyers. And then when I was in the 14, 15 years old, I finished my high school around 15 years old. And I was very young, but for sure I had the advice of my family. Okay, why don't you continue with the tradition, and why don't you study to become a lawyer? At 15 years old, 16 years old, you want to hear your own voice and you want to build your own path. And I say no. However, I was very interested in community. That was very important, to continue working with the community. And then that's why I decided to go for a speech language pathologist. It was a beautiful journey. I was able to help a lot, to learn a lot, to grow a lot. And then I opened my own practice with a colleague. It was a great experience. Then we went through vacations. We were closing the practice around middle November, and we will reopen it middle January. And the invitation came and said, would you like to join the airline just for the period where Christmas period and give us a hand with the PR? And I said, okay, why not? So that why not ended up being 5 years. And we need to be open for that, right? Doesn't mean that everything is craven a stone and you study that and you need to do this. No, you are in constant growing and changing and evolving. Life takes you in different paths, and we need to be open to embrace that. Mm-hmm. It was a great experience. Yeah, so I ended up with the airline, took a sabbatical, came to Canada to study. I wanted to do something about human resources, and I did it. And then all the rest happened. Being in Montreal, or remarried, I started knocking doors to work as a speech language pathologist, which was very difficult. We have the order of Quebec, the order of Ontario, and I went through all the paperwork, all the evaluations, everything that you can imagine. So what they say at the time, that was a lot more black and white than now. It was a big no. It was a big no. Basically, I needed to take another 3 years in order to be able to practice as a speech pathologist. And I say, I probably it's not what I want to do anymore. And I have a baby. No, I don't think that this is going to happen. Then I got invited to work on a project that was creating a library for aerospace. And they needed a translator. So for some reason, they learned about me and they invited me to be part of the project. And I was extremely proud to be part of that because of, the idea of working for this experience. That was really, really good. And then that was the foundation, I believe, for me to think about working as an interpreter.
Okay.
So I think that was the reason. The reason why I say, this is something that I really enjoy doing it. So I needed to coordinate the conception of these generic flight safety Library is the name of this program, of this project. And it was incredible. I worked with them for 2 years, doing the translation till the end of the project. And then I noticed that I enjoy very much working with languages. And I say, I would like to, bridge the gap of communication among people and among, very limited English speakers and the communities. So that was the foundation.
I love that. And you were an international student, long before the rush of international students. So you've experienced a lot and probably needed to deal with a lot on your own in terms of the transition. And let's jump forward to your time in Kingston now and how you got into teaching in the college, and then how kind of that international student experience that you had is helping you kind of in your day-to-day work.
So, yes, I came, as I mentioned to you, I started to navigate and everything. There was no GPS at the time. I'm talking about 100 years ago. So you carry your map, so you get lost. Montreal is a huge city, a beautiful, warm and beautiful city, but it still sometimes could be very difficult to navigate. I learned a lot about myself. I grew a lot. It was incredible. I had a baby. I got married. My family came for the wedding. But still, they were visitors and they left. And then to lead with all the rest. But it was incredible. It was incredible. So when we moved to Kingston, I got invited to create a program at the Kingston Seniors Association. So that was my first experience teaching, even though I was teaching in Colombia. I was a teaching assistant. I was all that. So I got in touch with the Seniors Association, and a very kind lady there says, you know what, it would be great if you create something for us. And I said, absolutely. So I created a program that was called, and is called, Spanish for Travelers. So it was a combination of the language, but to me, the most important is the culture. We cannot leave the culture outside. And oftentimes this is what you find when you are talking about languages, right? To me, to learn a language without knowing the culture is missing, is definitely missing. So we are missing the connection. We lose the context and the true soul of the communication if we miss that part. So I started with the Seniors Association, and I continue, as I mentioned before, very inspired about communication and languages and multiculturalism, and the fact that I start seeing international students coming. Then I decided to take the certification as interpreter. So I have the certification, and I continue taking a little bit more of that with family violence. I work with sexual assault victims, trafficking, all those kind of very difficult cases. Somebody needs to do the job, but to me, it's very important to be the one who helped bridge the gap of communication, to be the voice of the victims. So to me, that's very, very important. And I continue doing that. We're always looking for something. I want to be able to contribute to make this world a little better. And we all have a different way to do it. So that's mine. That gives me great, it's very gratifying, is that sense of achievement when I see that something goes right, that this person was able to be treated equally because somebody was his voice or her voice, and he was able to get that. So that to me is very important. So that's why I started as an interpreter.
And is that work based in Kingston only, or do you do it online, or do you travel?
Depends. That depends on the organization. I work actually for 2 different organizations. One is set in Toronto. One is set in Belleville. So they have people calling, we need that. There is in a hospital, has been an accident. Somebody's in jail. I need an interpreter, Spanish. Can you send someone? And then they start looking for the person and they assign you. Sometimes it's travel involved. If you are willing to do it, depends on the case.
Well, that must be so fulfilling. Difficult work, but fulfilling in being able to assist somebody in a time of crisis.
Yeah, it is very fulfilling. It's hard for the soul. It is indeed. I cannot deny that. But I always say to myself, somebody needs to do that, right? And that helps you to your compassion, to be more present, your empathy, and understand all these experiences and bring them to my classroom. What I mean by that is not that I bring the cases to my classroom, but the perspective.
Yes. Let's talk about that. What are you teaching right now, and how are you bringing a lot of these experiences forward?
Okay, I teach now professional development and communications for the fitness and health promotion. I teach communication and professionalism for the PSW program, and I'm over the moon with both cohorts. What a wonderful group of young adults trying to open doors for themselves and learn. They are so invested. Seriously, this semester has been an incredible experience. So through the years, I was first hired to teach Spanish, like a concept. And the reason, this is an interesting way, an interesting thing. When I did my certification for become an interpreter, I graduated, and the director of the program called me and I say, okay, there is a conference that is going to be held in Kingston, and I was called and look for the best two students to go to work in that conference. Are you willing to do that? And I said, absolutely, absolutely. I would love to do that. So it was a 3-day conference, very interesting. I started with a colleague. My colleague got ill the second day, and I ended up having the conference for myself. It was brutal, but it was doable. It was an incredible experience. So that was through St. Lawrence College. The idea at the time, I believe, that was created, and I will have a meeting with the person in charge at the time that was in the International. They were trying to unify criteria for education for Canada, United States, and Mexico. So the idea was to facilitate, to help for students to have the opportunity to change countries if they wanted to do it, to look for further education, whatever the reason was. But for them to be able to carry their education, their knowledge with them, and for the new country of the country what they will be saying, that they will accept and acknowledge that education. So that's something that we are still dealing with. So it was an incredible, it went very well. It was a wonderful turnout. And at the end of that, they came to congratulate me, and that's it. 2 days after, I got a phone call from the same person that organized the event to say, would you be willing to come for a meeting? And I said, of course. Then we chat. I say, I would love for you to do something with this. We don't have the program. We had it at night as a continuing education, but we would love to have it as a part of the program during the day for the different programs we are running. And I say, wonderful. Let me see what is in place, and we'll see. Then I was sent to work with Nancy Scoville. Oh, love her to pieces. So we met, we had an interview, but it was a very interesting interview. I said, would you be able to teach now? And we work in a platform for global voices. Look at the students that we have. That cannot be a monologue. That can be an exchange of information and knowledge. But we need to understand the power that we have, the platform that we have that is given to us, and all the knowledge, not only academic, but the unity, the power that we have to contribute in different ways to make our communities, our college, our country, our world a little bit better. I have something that I always present in my class that I say, pick a chair, not a side. There's always unity in differences, because you always want to be with this group and the other because they are from the same country. And I say, no, let's do a little different. Right? But that needs to be very gently, and it needs to be modeled. Cannot be a monologue. You need to model that set of mind, definitely.
It really is perspective.
This perspective is challenging, but it's incredible. You encounter through the years of working and just living that you cannot be responsible for the unwillingness of people to learn. How am I going to be responsible for that? So it's not my responsibility. It's not on me. Sometimes you meet people that already have an idea about you, even without knowing you. Because the country that you are coming from, or because of your accent, or because you are a woman. And that's fine. That's not my responsibility. You continue going in the same direction, with the same passion, the same commitment towards your students, towards education, towards your family, towards yourself. And that needs to be consistent. That's it.
I love this, Maria Helena. What makes What's the best day for you? What's a great day at the college?
I'm take a lot of time preparing. I love prepping, and my husband laughs and say, "But you again? I mean, what are you doing?" And I said, "I just want to tweak this, and I want to do that because there is new people, and I think that will, make an impact." And to prepare all this, and when I present it, and I see the eyes, the wow, wow, that's super cool. Or a case study that we're going to work together. Or when they read the feedbacks that I write to them, that they love because this is something, is massive. But I always say, when I was at the university, I never appreciate the good job, well done. Okay, give me a little bit more. I would like to know what I did so well, and when can I, that part is very important. So I take a lot of time. I invest myself a lot in writing a very good feedback, and the appreciation when they come to me and say, "Maria, thank you for that feedback. That was awesome. I can build from that." I said, "That's the point. I want you to be able to build from that."
And those great days lead to great careers. So looking back right now, recognizing that you're certainly not near the end of your career yet, but what do you see as kind of some of those most inspirational moments?
When I started teaching my Spanish culture and conversation, for sure you have students that are very hesitant to participate, to be part, and I introduce activities when they are invited to bring news to the classroom because I want them to know that the world is wider. So what's going on in this country? Bring it, present it to us. We're going to learn it through you. They need to do the research about specific countries because I teach intercultural communication, multiculturalism, but I always try to include that part. In the Spanish one, I have 40 students that moved to Spanish-speaking countries and speak perfect Spanish, and they started in my classroom.
Wow.
So I brag because of that. I'm very proud. The textbook that we use is affordable. It's the kind of book like when we were learning, when we were little, that you can erase, that you can make mistakes, that you can fold, that you can do that. Anything that is expensive and hardcover, they are afraid to use it because they are hoping to sell it at the end of the semester. And that is, no. So I found this one that is amazing. And I always say, we're going to cover these chapters, but I invite you to continue working. And through the semester, I have 2 culinary management students. One lives in Argentina, one lives in Spain, and they continue studying, and we are still in touch.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yes, and another 2, there is one in Mexico and one in Colombia, all married with Latin. They are 1 girl and 3 gentlemen, yes, all married, working on their field in a program that they learn at St. Lawrence College. They attain the certification and they love the idea of Spanish speaking, the idea of the Spanish culture. And they decided to travel. I always say to you, if you save this amount of money every day, at the end of the year, you can travel. You can go here, and the prices are here, and the tips are this. So they got very motivated. So I have 4 students that started in my class, and they have lives in Spanish-speaking countries, working on their careers and succeeding.
Wow.
Being a master chef here, teaching culinary in a college in Spain. So all that makes me happy.
That must be so meaningful to you, Maria. I know before we end the show that I want to get you to share something I've heard you speak to others about on a couple of different occasions, and that is about the importance of accents.
I say, you know what an accent means? That you are brave. An accent means that you've been in different places and you have different experiences. What can be better than that? Carry your accent with pride, with a lot of pride, not with hesitation and fear and doubt.
Well, thank you so much, Maria Helena. This has been such an honor, and we are so fortunate at St. Lawrence to have you among us as faculty members and to also have you in our communities as an interpreter. The work that you're doing is so meaningful, and it makes our community stronger.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to CAAT Tales, stories that matter to faculty and beyond. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit slcfaculty.ca and stay connected with us on social media.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policies, positions, or statements of OPSU SEFPO St. Lawrence College or any affiliated organizations. This podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. While every effort is made to ensure accuracy, SLC Faculty Local 417 makes no representations or warranties of any kind express or implied about the completeness, reliability, or suitability of the information shared. Any reliance placed on such information is strictly at the listener's own risk. Music and sound effects used in this podcast are licensed or royalty-free. We respect copyright law and encourage our listeners do the same.